Hello, everyone, and welcome back to They Don't Teach This in Law School. I'm Charlie Mann, your host and owner of law firm Alchemy. And I have a guest today who I met essentially through LinkedIn, saw some of the stuff that he was posting. And while I may not have the long, luxurious locks that he has, I did have hair down to my shoulders in college. And it was an immediate connection point since he goes by the moniker the long hair lawyer. So I'm excited to talk with him today, get to know him a little bit better, how he is owning his own brand, how he is starting his own law firm, and all other kinds of cool stuff in a conversation with Tyler O'Brien. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. When I was just looking down your list of, some of the people that you've brought on in the last 6 or 8 months, I saw a bunch of people who I follow on LinkedIn who I view as very insightful, successful people. And I was pretty excited to listen to some of those podcasts. So basically, it's an honor to be here. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm stoked to talk with you, Tyler. And so, you're going to be answering the question, what is the one thing they don't teach you in law school?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a two-parter for me, but it kind of starts with
Sweet.
social skills and understanding it's basically social skills and understanding the social hierarchy that really exists in the practice of law and the traditional law firm environment that most law students, at least while they're going through it, think that they're going to wind up in. So I think that there's really not much emphasis on social skills. There's some networking events that they say, hey, just go to. But there's really not much of an education on how to interact with these legal professionals who we come to find out are all a little socially awkward in some sense and use a lot of jargony terms and really like to talk about niche areas. That's a hard thing to step into as a law student or even as a new associate. It makes it really difficult to read a room. The other piece to that is, like it or not, and I'd say most of us don't, the typical law firm environment, or maybe the legal industry in general, kind of has this hierarchy in place where there's a lot of horizontal relationships between people who might be considered non-lawyers, which I know is some people view as a pretty negative term. I'm pretty ambivalent about it. But people who are legal assistants, paralegals are kind of viewed as being at the bottom of this period. People who are people who are new associates or, are kind of at a mid-level. And then there's, the principals, the partners, and so on. I'm not condoning that environment, but that's pretty much the way that life is for new attorneys as they enter the workforce. And we're not really given any tools to deal with that or recognize that or read the room. And we're also not given any methods of kind of combating that social hierarchy either. So I think it's just totally a missed opportunity there to teach people kind of how to read the room and how to enter that legal environment in a way that they don't end up, just doing the thing that's socially wrong in whatever the setting is and ending up with egg on their face at some point,
So if you could put in place something to help rectify that issue, what might it look like and what would you want taught to those students?
Yeah, I think it would kind of start with, I think it would be honestly some sort of workshop on empathy, trying to understand other people's motivations and why they behave in the way that they do. That's a piece of it. It's just a lot of us who go through law school don't place an emphasis on social skills. We place an emphasis on facts and knowledge and being correct. And so a lot of people that are graduating and entering the workforce don't really know, they don't understand other people in a way that they need. So that's a big piece of it. The other thing is I think that law schools basically just need to acknowledge the legal environment for what it is. It's a very, it can be a very elitist, hierarchical, old-fashioned environment, and people need to know what they're walking into. Basically, whether that's to combat that or just live with it, I think people need a better understanding. So even just sitting down in a workshop or a class or whatever it is and explaining, this is the way things are. This is a normal expectation of how someone may react to you asking them a question when you're not their superior or, whatever that might be. So.
Now, you use the phrase, it's not something that you necessarily condone, that hierarchical structure. So I'm really curious because you're a guy who decided to chart his own path. What made you look at that and go, "I'm not willing to tolerate that"?
Yeah, yeah. Well, honestly, I think it's unproductive. For me, it kind of actually goes back to when I was in college. I was the president of the interfraternity council at WSU where I went to school. So I was in some sense in charge of I think like 23 different fraternal organizations. Loosely,
Jeez.
like oversaw them as a governing body. It's not like I had direct authority over them individually, but we did a lot of work
Still.
around hazing, right, and hazing prevention. And basically, I see a lot of parallels between the hazing that goes on in Greek life or student organizations and sports and stuff like that, and the patterns of behavior that show up in law firms. And I have a pretty serious problem with it because it basically doesn't allow for much progress. When we have
Mm,
like hazing and just kind of these repetitive negative attitudes, looking at newer people, people with less seniority as being less than, we basically end up building a lot of horizontal relationships where, certain classes of people, if we want to call them that, can bond with each other over how much they hate their superiors. But you basically don't get the opportunity to build vertical relationships where people who are more experienced are sharing knowledge and things like that. And when it comes to knowledge specifically, I just had a post on LinkedIn yesterday I made about kind of the difference between knowledge and intelligence. But basically, we
mm,
prioritize in the legal industry knowledge and knowing facts so much that sometimes people who are in higher positions will kind of withhold some of the baseline information, the rules. They won't tell a new associate that, oh, you need to have all these rules of civil procedure or whatever it might be memorized, and then they'll kind of use that knowledge to kind of uphold their own position down the road. And I just view that entire structure as being very negative, and that's part of the reason why I decided to go out on my own and starting on my own, do things a little differently. So
I love that whole just gonna flip the table, walk out of the room, and say, "No, I'm gonna go and do my thing. Not only do I not condone this, but I'm just going to be a non-participant in it." So you go and you start your own law firm. What was that process like for you? Like what was the first 6, 12 months of that journey like?
yeah, yeah, and it's pretty recent, so I can definitely
Yeah.
definitely lay that all out. I do want to make it clear I'm not some like heroic person that had a horrible work experience as a law clerk and like bailed because I'm fighting the machine. My previous work wasn't that bad. I don't want them all thinking that I hated it or that they're a bad law firm or something. Part of the reason that I chose to go solo when I did was circumstantial. So my
Mm,
basically, I was all lined up to be an associate at a firm up in Washington. My wife, who wasn't my wife at the time, is now, got a job offer in California. We moved to the San Francisco Bay Area because she had a really good position and I could basically be an attorney anywhere. So, timing
mhm,
wise, that's how that worked out. But I saw it as an opportunity to go out on my own, partially to kind of just avoid working in that law firm environment I was describing, but also because I felt that I could, while it might take some time, financially, it would be better for me than just going the typical associate track if I played things out right. So in the beginning, basically my first step was setting up everything in the back end.
mhm,
I'm a completely virtual office, so I didn't have to worry about rent and things of that nature. I also knew I was going to focus mostly on transactional work for the time being, so there wasn't going to be a lot of printing and filing and physical equipment that I needed. But I needed to
right.
understand how the different softwares, practice management systems I could get. Basically what I needed, how I could integrate them all so they could talk to each other, so I could create something that was efficient for me and hopefully scalable at some point down the road. So really that's what that first 6 months or so looked like. I was also I just passed the Washington bar exam and then
Mm.
found out I was moving to California. And so for some ethical reasons, basically because virtual practice is relatively new, a lot of states haven't yet determined, and the ABA hasn't offered some great recommendations
Right.
as to whether a lawyer licensed in one state can live in and have a virtual remote practice in another state serving only clients. So to make it simpler, it was a little bit of a gray area with the California Bar Association, whether me living here exclusively representing Washington clients in Washington matters would constitute the unauthorized practice of law. And I did not want to be the poster child for that. And I knew that I want, if I'm going to live here, I might as well get licensed here too. So
Yeah.
I took the California bar exam, I think July 28th, 2022. And then, of course, I had about 6 or 8 months of waiting to get that license so that I could really go out and advertise myself as a lawyer and provide legal services to people in a big, public fashion. So that's kind of what it looks like. Basically, setting all that stuff up in the background, spending so much time just sitting around thinking about business development and QuickBooks and trust accounting and ethical issues and
all the good
practice
stuff,
management, all that fun stuff, which I enjoyed putting together. But that's what that first 6 months or so was about. It was all the back end. So
you have the back end set up. When you think about, okay, I'm a new lawyer, I'm opening my own firm, you don't walk into it with a big old base of clients. What was your thought process on the business development front, and what are you doing these days to acquire clients?
Yeah, so basically for me, I was like, to start off with, it's going to be all social media because social media is free. And I'm in the right I'm in the right age demographic, and my brand stands out in a manner that I knew I could perform fairly well on social media just by being basically just by being authentic. That I could gain some amount of immediate gains and impressions because people would just think, oh, this is interesting. Is this guy a real lawyer? It's something that would stick with them, right? I basically started off doing blog posts on my website. And I created an Instagram account, a YouTube channel, which YouTube is tough. So I really don't do much with that. I have the channel and the handle in case I want to develop some longer form video content down the road. But basically Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, reposting blog posts, and then basically developing a larger network on LinkedIn, which is probably one of the most, it might be the most valuable thing I've done in the short term was focusing on LinkedIn. The other thing I'll say is that even though I don't have this client base or this social media presence, I do have relationships with just a ton of people that I've developed over the course of my life, right? And I think a lot of people forget how much support that they actually have from others, especially for me.
Love that statement.
Yeah, thanks. I was really involved in my community in high school. It's a small town, but I played 4 sports and I was the president of the FFA chapter and did all these things. And then I moved on. I stayed involved in my collegiate community. I built relationships in law school. So, once you go out on your own and you just kind of advertise that to people, for some people, you are top of mind. And when something does come along, they'll at least reach out to you and say, hey, so I think it's kind of a neglected marketing channel to just like pretend like you don't have all these past relationships.
Oh, 100% agree. Now I do want to zoom in real quick on the LinkedIn side of things, because you did mention that that's been a productive channel for you. So what do you think makes it productive, and how would you define it being a productive channel?
Well, I think it's productive. Part of it is because the people that I've been connections with for a while, people I went to law school with, or people that just have something in common with me, are willing to just help me out and send me clients every once in a while, no strings attached. Hey, I have this person, and I'm talking about lawyers especially. I have this person, I'm not equipped to deal with issue X, or I'm not licensed in California. I think you need to be licensed in California. And a lot of people just say, hey, send me, they just send me people that, there's no quid pro quo. It's not like when you try to build like a referral relationship with a non-lawyer where they really want to ask you, and maybe I'm being overgeneral, but they really want something in return. They're like, yeah, sure, we'll send you estate planning clients, but you better send me people to do financial planning for it. that
Right.
type of thing.
Right.
So I think it's been good. The other thing is, at least within the legal community, and when I say legal community, I don't just mean lawyers, but people who are in legal tech, legal operations. There are a lot of people who resonate with my brand because they basically
Mm.
want to fight the machine. And so it's been easy for me to just make occasional posts on LinkedIn and gain a lot more impressions and followers in that environment than it is for me to compete with people on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. So
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, taking it to a different space where, yeah, there isn't quite as high a volume. The relationships can be a little bit tighter. I mean, I've found, obviously, the reason you and I are doing this podcast is because of LinkedIn, and part of what you said, that brand kind of resonating. So I was a theater major in college and trying to find my way in the world, and that whole, like, to a degree, fight the machine thing. There's a vibe to that I get along with very much so. And that goes to the brand that you have started to are establishing, the long hair lawyer. So obviously it stands out. Obviously there's some stuff behind it. So I really want to unpack. Maybe it's as simple as why the long hair lawyer, but I don't think it's that simple because there's certain obvious things. But what's the like hidden motivational factor of going, I'm going to build something that just looks totally different?
yeah, yeah. I think for me, this is easy. I love talking about this, but for me, the
Sweet.
thing is that there is such a negative stereotype, and there are so many negative images that are associated with attorneys. When
Mm,
a layperson, regular person, even attorneys think of attorneys, they tend to think of they either think of some stuffy, fuddy duddy, generally male figure that just kind of is fumbling their way through life. That's greedy and just not a nice person, or they think
mm,
of some like very parasitic, fancy, selfish, egotistical person. And a lot of times that image is associated with a certain type of dress. It's a certain type of like clean shaven
yeah.
person with short hair. And so I felt that by basically divorcing myself and my brand from that image and doing something that was completely different, people would be able to associate the fact that I was going to be behaving in a different way too. The other underlying thing is I grew my hair out during law school, not for any particular reason, just because. And the entire time, there's so many people that would just say, "Hey, you're gonna have to get your hair cut to get a real job, aren't you?" Blah blah blah. And I'm just like, it's like 20. I don't know when it was. It was like 2019 or something at that time, and I'm just like, I really don't think that this matters. You really don't have to comport to this image. Even if I'm going to be a litigator or something, the judge is not going to care if I have long hair. So I realized that was going to work. Of course, a lot of people now will tell me that, oh, well, now you can never cut your hair. And I think they're missing the mark a little bit there because, it's a logo, it's an image. Of course, I can cut my hair. The concept still lives on. But some people are catching on to it now. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, it certainly stands out for all the reasons that you mentioned, and it is I can hear that little rebellious streak. Did that show up in other parts of your life? Just naturally, you've always had a little bit of the rebellious kick. Like if you tell me to do that, or I'm not allowed to do that, I'm gonna go do it. Is that just who you are?
Yeah, that's absolutely how I am. I have one of my interesting traits, which probably isn't all that helpful as a lawyer, is I really I don't like rules that don't have justifications. You
Hmm.
should obey the law, but when it comes to an institution, say a student handbook or something like
Uh,
that, or in college they say, oh, you can't enroll in this class until you've enrolled in XYZ. I've always been a person that says, well, you have no basis for that. There's absolutely no reason. It doesn't make any sense. I've always been willing to challenge those things for myself and on behalf of other people. That's probably part of my
well,
drive to be a lawyer and an advocate is I'm frustrated with rules that have no basis, laws that have no basis, whatever they might be. But it really frustrates me when someone who doesn't have the means to articulate their own reasoning that they deserve some type of exception. It really frustrates me when they can't defend themselves. I always want to step in and help them out. So in that sense, yeah. And if you ask my mom, yeah, I've probably always had a pretty rebellious streak in that way. So
I like it though. And when I look at the fact that it looks like you're handling some estates work, some business work, like those are areas that, especially with the coaching clients I work with who are in those areas, a lot of them do naturally try and think about. I mean, and I think this is really true for upper level estate work, where you do get to think creatively and you do get to look at like what the established rules are and go, well, people are following the intended idea, but they're not following the literal idea. And we have a strategy where we're following the literal letter of the law as it was written, as opposed to, it's when you talk, like, I'm just starting to get into making sure that I have every bit of little financial detail handled on my business. It was the last thing that I was willing to worry a lot about, Tyler.
yeah.
And it's interesting. Some people just want to plug you into the same old system, and others want to actually ask questions and say, well, hold on, like, this is how we should handle it in your situation, because this is how the law actually applies to you, not the generic type of advice. So are you going into that level of kind of custom planning, custom building for the clients, or are you leaning towards packaging? How's it all working for you?
Yeah. So the answer is yes and no, and it depends, of course, because that's what we always say. But so
Perfect.
it depends a little bit on which area. So
Yeah.
I am well aware that the way for me to make money the fastest as a business would be to niche down really significantly and be the absolute best person at XYZ. But that's not exactly what I'm interested in. I'm a little bit more of a generalist because I enjoy dabbling in a lot of things, but I'm also a little bit more of a generalist because I'd like a business that's scalable in different practice areas. So that's part
Hmm.
of the reason of why I'm advertising myself and doing estate planning while doing business consulting, while doing contracts, or even handling some demand letters and minor litigation stuff. It's because I'm interested in all those things. I want a scalable business. But even though I'm just on my own, I view those different practice areas in some sense as being little different departments. And so as
Hmm.
I scale things up, hopefully, I plan on doing things a little bit differently in each one. So hopefully I'm not straying too far from your question, but when it comes to estate planning, what I'm aiming at is having a practice that's where, I do consultations. I'm very like sociable and we are hands-on and I am helping people kind of customize planning. But a lot of that is going to wind up being fairly form based, at least for people who are under the federal um, thresholds, which is basically like $12 million for a individual, $24 million for a married couple. People are under that level. It might vary state to state, but a lot of it's going to be form based. A lot of it's going to be mostly the same for people. So that's a practice area that I view as getting to that point where it's a pretty template based. And as we scale it up, someone else can take responsibility for, um,
Mm-hmm.
for handling a lot of pieces of that if I get to that point. When it comes to the consulting for businesses side, reviewing contracts, contract drafting, that stuff I view as everything is very deal specific. Everything is
Mm.
customizable. Sure, we get to a point where, a single member LLC, every single one of them basically needs the same operating agreement. And I get that. And, we can offer stuff, I can offer stuff like that at flat rates or whatever. But what I really enjoy doing is helping people, basically doing legal research as people come up with very particular business problems, which everyone does
Mm.
in business. And I view there as being a pretty underserved group of individuals, those being individuals and businesses, those being people who run fairly small businesses, because those people don't like to deal with lawyers. They're not accustomed to dealing with lawyers. And
Mm-hmm.
so my hope is, my brand's approachable enough and my practice is agile enough that I can onboard those clients quickly and help them with very finite, very particular issues, and hopefully kind of help people out that way. So
Yeah, you used the word scale earlier, and I knew as soon as you said it, I was like, I know I've got some questions for Tyler about
Yeah.
scale because one of the things that you're developing is a brand that I don't necessarily like using this term, but it is the most accurate term. It's a personal brand, right?
Mhm.
It's very much endemic to you, even though I can see that you're already decoupling it in ways where you say, look, the brand is an idea. It's not my literal hair. I'm allowed to cut my hair, people. Give me a break here, right?
Yeah.
But how do you take the idea of long hair lawyer and when you say scale, like imagine this thing having five, six, seven lawyers working for you. What does that mean for the brand and how do you keep that spirit alive?
Yeah, I think it's going to be there. There are so many things to unpack there because I think to basically maintain the integrity of this brand while growing is going to require thinking about everything from the way that people are compensated to the way that they interact with clients, and it's really a lot. I basically think the main thing in terms of just retaining brand integrity is going to be to kind of slow the process of scaling, which sounds a little ridiculous, especially with the point I'm at, because I'm not going to go hire another attorney in the next 6 months or something. That's just not where we're at, where I'm at.
Hmm.
But I think that ensuring that if I do get to a point where I'm bringing in a lot of work and I feel that pressure to scale so I can serve more people and make more money too, because that's what business is about.
Yep.
Going at a slow enough pace to make sure, I'm hiring people and working with people who want to work with me because they like the concept of the brand. They want to be different in some way. I think basically keeping things people centric and people focused is going to be really huge there. So
So, I mean, really, like the long hair lawyer increasingly sounds sounds like a culture. It sounds like a little bit of a renegade spirit. There's an ethos to it as opposed to a literal interpretation of it. Would that be fair?
oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm okay when people, when people interact with my brand or see me for the first time and they think, oh, it's just a gimmick. The dude has long hair. He's a lawyer. I get it. I'm okay with that because people will remember it. And the next time they see it, it might
Yeah.
pique their interest a little bit. So as people dive deeper and get the opportunity to interact with the brand more, whether that's through Instagram, LinkedIn, social media, in person, whatever it might be, they kind of get that deeper understanding. And my hope is that can carry on. That's why that's why I sell T-shirts on my website. I bet I'm probably the only attorney in the world. I'm sure that's not the case, but I'm probably one of few attorneys out there that is selling T-shirts. It's not because I'm trying to make money off of T-shirts. I don't make very much money
No.
off of T-shirt sales. But the thing is, it's a T-shirt is so approachable. It's something that literally anyone can engage in. You don't need some sophisticated opinion about the law to buy a T-shirt and wear it around. So it works for marketing because people see it, they're interested in it. They're walking
Hmm.
billboards, and that's fantastic. But that's not really my point there. My hope is really more that people will the brand resonates with them, they wear it, they represent it, they take it into their workplace, and other people are like, what's that all about? And maybe it changes culture a little bit. That's kind of what my hope is for that. So
I like that. So, look, with this establishing a brand that is doesn't look like anything else that's out there, I have to believe that there was or perhaps is some level of fear regarding that. So I'd be interested in digging in. Like, do you experience that fear and how do you handle it?
oh yeah, it was very basically what you're talking about gave me a lot of anxiety for quite some period of time. But it really doesn't anymore. What I realized, my concern, I guess, or that fear came from um, thinking that all kinds of people, were going to think that I was illegitimate or unintelligent or something. They'd associate negative feelings with the brand and think, oh, this guy's not a real
Mm.
lawyer or this guy's an idiot. And basically, that didn't really happen. I was concerned about that in general, and I was very cautious in the way I advertised things so that I wouldn't develop this kind of illegitimacy in people's eyes. But my
Hmm.
biggest concern was that people in the legal community wouldn't like it, that I would basically be kind of shunned in some way by people who are more on a traditional law track. And that didn't happen at all either. Basically, I've pretty much gotten overwhelming support from most people, and there haven't been any real negative interactions, you know? So basically, I guess my advice, if someone else were kind of going out on a limb and trying to change their industry a little bit or just do something that was unconventional, is that people probably aren't going to, they're probably not going to have these negative feelings about you. And they're most certainly
Yep.
not out to get you. Even, especially in the legal industry, that's kind of a hard, especially if you've worked in litigation at all, that feels like a um, that's a difficult concept to get. But people in general are not out to get you. If you do something risky like this, the worst thing that's probably going to happen is nobody's going to care. Which is something, you know, you
Yep.
have to be a little concerned with too. But at the end of the day, if nobody cares and nobody remembers, and an idea flops or a LinkedIn post gets no likes or something, nobody's going to see it. Nobody's going to retain that in their mind anyway. So, you know, those social risks are things you have to acknowledge, but those risks are low, and the upside is pretty big. So,
I remember the first time that after getting my first tattoo on my upper arm and wearing a shirt that was going to show that I had tattoos at an event that was going to have a bunch of other lawyers, like being way up in my head about it. And what I found is, and this is great, there were some people who didn't react super well. Or I remember one person had something snarky to say. I was like, perfect. I know exactly the type of person that I'm not going to want to deal with for the rest of my career. It's a very quick filter to use for who you want to interact with in business and in life.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, Tyler, if people want to connect with you, get to know you a little bit better, check out the long hair lawyer stuff, where should we send them?
Yeah. So LinkedIn is a great place. If you're on LinkedIn, you know, you can just look me up, Tyler O'Brien, or you can find my page, which is just the long hair lawyer. But also, pretty much most social media I'm on too. So my handle's at longhair.lawyer on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And I post content there pretty frequently. So if you want to just kind of casually engage and see what I'm all about, that's great. People can, if they want to get a hold of me, can basically just message me on whatever their preferred social media application is, and I will reply to them. Obviously, I don't hand out
Nice.
legal advice, but I think there's enough precautions in place so that people know not to do that. That I'm not too worried about it. And then if they want to basically jump straight to my website, get an idea of the services I provide, you know, whether those are the fees involved, basically any question you could have, the landing spot is longhair.lawyer, which is my website. So it's just longhair.lawyer. That easy.
Awesome. All right. So, last little question for you. It's a three-parter. So, what are you reading, watching, and listening to these days?
Interesting. And I think I knew this one was coming too. As far as reading goes, I really haven't read for pleasure much since law school. It kind of took the joy out of it. I'm trying to earn it back. I did
Mm.
recently read A River Runs Through It for the first time. That was the first time reading that book, and that was the first book I've read in like 3 or 4 years, which was just really good.
Wow.
It's a story about fly fishing in the outdoors. A lot of people have seen the movie. The book's worth a read.
Mhm.
So I enjoyed that. Prior to that, and if you're going into law school, it would be an interesting book to read. There's a book called The Last Days of Night, which is told from the perspective of a lawyer that worked on the. It's historical fiction, but it's from the perspective of the lawyer that was working on. He was a patent attorney for George Westinghouse. It's all about the invention of the light bulb, and it's got Nikola Tesla and
Oh,
Thomas Edison
wow.
in it. It's a really good read. Haven't revisited it since law school, so I don't know how accurate it is. I know it's hard to read a law book or, you know, watch Suits or something as a lawyer. So there's that. As far as what I'm watching, I've been watching Supernatural lately with my wife.
Nice.
Basically just because it's a good show. It's got a great storyline. It's pushing me a little bit because I don't do so well with scary stuff, and I know it's not that scary. But anyway, that's something we're doing together. And then as far as
You're serious about not liking scary stuff if supernatural ranks as scary, but I get you there. I get you there.
yeah,
I'm not a horror movie person. My wife loves horror movies. I don't tolerate them well.
yeah, yeah, I'm definitely not. I just can't do it. It's
Yeah.
nightmares for weeks. So, um, and then as far as what I'm listening to, aside from your podcast, which I'm going to be doing a lot of catching up on, I've been listening a
Awesome.
bit to the Newfangled Lawyer, which is a different podcast I was actually on. It's hosted by Patrick Patino. And if you want to basically just listen to a whole bunch of people from the legal space who like are really interesting and know what they're talking about, have casual conversations, it's a good place to go to. So I'd listen to that one. And just a plug for anyone who is wanting to like go out on their own, or maybe a law student who's trying to learn more about the back end of the legal environment.
Mm,
There's a podcast called New Solo that's hosted by Adriana Linares.
nice.
It started in like 2014. I listened to every single episode of that prior to
Wow.
graduating from law school, and it made a huge difference. Everything from billing, timekeeping, trust accounting, all these different things. And even though it's an older legal technology podcast, it's still super relevant. So big recommendation there.
That is awesome. And I know that you have your appearance on Newfangled Lawyer as part of your website. So
Yeah.
I know that, yeah, which is a very smart reusage of an asset. Well, Tyler, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the interactions on LinkedIn. Looking forward to many more of those. And I encourage everyone to go and connect with you and, see how you're bringing a different level of authenticity and yourself into the building of a brand in a law firm. I mean, I think it's really cool. It's a little bit of building in public that you're doing, and
Yeah.
there are going to be a lot of lawyers who are inevitably inspired by it. So, Tyler, I appreciate your time, your insight, your knowledge today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Awesome, and we will see you all in the next episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School.